on this screen. Well, it is, but
Do we?
there's a clicker and an arrow.
The down arrow, the clicker's right here to your right.
Or do we just hit the down arrow?
Down takes you forward, up takes you back.
Okay.
I might just use the arrow. That might confuse me.
So did you have a question about the remote?
We were just discussing how down moves you
Yes,
forward.
it's bizarre. Yeah, down. What you think is backwards is really forwards, and up is backwards. So.
Maybe I'll just hold it upside
Backwards.
down.
They're going forward. Got it.
And before we get started, I'm going to bring up the QR code. Do you want them to submit questions as well?
Well, we still got 2 minutes. We still got 2 minutes.
Oh, we can stretch, right?
So they're running.
How'd the last session go?
It went well.
Yeah,
well.
Folks,
It's
folks
not
in the
quite as
back,
full
you
as
can.
this,
We do
but
have
it's
some
about
seats
three-quarter
still up
full.
front. If you want to make your way on up front before we get started.
Hey, John. Doing all right, John? Good. Come to the front, man. See? For those just now coming in, there are a few seats up front if you want to fill in the front. And we'll get started here in about 1 minute.
I like how the noise volume.
All right, everybody, we're right at 10:15. There are a few seats up front for those coming in. We'll jump right on in. So this is the second session this morning. It's the 10:15 session here. Thank you for being at the pre-construction conference. The next session is submitting a successful PS&E package. We have 4 presenters to help out with this one. We've got Katrina Feltz, Tasha White, Jeff Wren, and Ken Kennedy. Few quick things. Hold your questions to the end is being asked. We do have a Slido app that we'll be using as part of the presentation. You can go ahead and scan the QR code now if you haven't. We'll also pop it back up when we ask the Slido questions as well. But we'll just jump right on in, and without any further ado, I'm assuming I'm going to hand it to you, Katrina, to get us started. Thank you, everybody.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? I think I can hear myself really loud. So, all right. Also, if you want to put questions in the Slido app, feel free to do that. So that's available for you to put questions in. All right. So we're going to get started on submitting a successful PS&E package. How many of you have submitted a PS&E package in the last year? Fantastic. How many are going to submit a PS&E package in the next year? Great. How many are you excited about submitting a PS&E package? Fantastic. All right. So we're going to start with a polling question. Eugene's going to get that up there. The question is, when does preparation for a quality PS&E package start? We've got A, when the project starts, B, after the environmental document is signed, C, when the right-of-way plans are complete, D, prior to going on the 12-month let list, or D, a couple weeks before the PS&E submittal date. D. E. All right, you can go. See what we're getting here. Very good. Yes, it's A, when a project starts. So assembling a good quality PS&E package starts with understanding why the project is needed and what the problem the project is going to solve. So this leads into having a good purpose and need, coordinating and communicating with stakeholders during the environmental decision-making process, having good design assumptions, coordinating early with utilities and with right-of-way, and developing and maintaining realistic schedules and producing high-quality deliverables throughout project delivery so that when we get to PS&E, we're not scrambling to get everything done. Who likes to scramble? Oh, I've got one person, 2 people, 3, wow, okay. I don't like to scramble personally, but all right. So outline for today, things we're gonna cover, why a complete PS&E package is important, also what's included in that package, the project manager's role, some common issues that we've seen with submittals, some tools and guidances that you can use, also some common items that might be missing for contract time, and then finally some information on specifications and addendums. Okay, so we'll start with why a PS&E package is important, but first I want to talk a little bit about what that PS&E package is. So the PS&E package is a compilation of all the pre-construction deliverables and decisions that were made. It's also the basis for the development of all the documents that will be provided to construction contractors for bidding purposes. The department expects timely and complete high-quality PS&E packages to be turned in. Ron Davenport issued a memo last November that said PS&E packages must be 100% complete and delivered by close of business no later than the PS&E date shown on the 12-month let list or as calculated through the project flowchart generator. So this includes striving to complete one package, not multiple packages. So as Jamie Bird said yesterday, don't turn an incomplete PS&E package. It does not go well. I let him know I was going to reference him, so I wasn't sure if he wanted to take a bow, but thank you, Jamie. So, right. All right, so why is that PS&E package important? Well, a complete PS&E package enables contract standards to develop a quality PS&E, or a quality contract bid proposal to prospective contractors to submit bids on. Late and incomplete PS&E packages jeopardize their review process and their ability to develop a quality contract bid proposal. Poor quality or incomplete PS&E packages also jeopardize our ability to meet our let date. It also increases our risk for contractors submitting higher bids than what they might if it was a good quality bid proposal. And it increases our risk for addendums and change orders during the construction process. So thorough and well-coordinated PS&E packages provide the necessary information to reduce and address construction risks during the department, I'm going to start over. Thorough and well-coordinated PS&E packages provide the necessary information to reduce and address construction risks, allowing the department to receive good quality bids, executing their contracts successfully, and construct a project with minimal revisions and claims. How many have received claims on their projects? They're not fun, I can tell you that. So it's good to try to avoid those. So next, what's included in a PS&E package? Well, we've got plans, specifications, estimates, certifications, agreements, regulatory approvals, permits, environmental documents, design exceptions. As you can see, there's a lot. So we have a handy tool to help everyone know what needs to be included in this PS&E package and also to help track these deliverables. This tool is called the PS&E checklist. So the PS&E checklist came out last fall, so fall of 2023. It was not discussed at last year's pre-construction workshop because it wasn't available. So the intent of this checklist is to allow project managers, both at NCDOT and at firms, to know what needs to be submitted on the PS&E date and where it should be placed on the project pre-construction site. It's also a living document, so project managers can track where the project team is at with each one of their deliverables. We do recommend that project managers start using this around the 15-month meeting when they're getting ready for their 15-month meeting. Reminder that 15-month meeting is the first formal touch point in moving the project towards letting. The goal of that meeting is to determine if the project is ready to be put on the 12-month let list. And this checklist and the 15-month meeting questions can help the project manager prepare for that meeting. Another intent of this checklist is to communicate with contract standards what's included in the PS&E submittal package. Contract standards does use this checklist to check their project, to check any project in, and so they will be following up with the project managers if they're seeing an incomplete checklist. All right, so as I mentioned before, Ron Davenport issued a memo on November 7th of 2023. In that memo, it talked about the 100% PS&E package and that this PS&E checklist is required as part of the submittal for centrally let projects. It's also a best practice for division projects. So I'm going to take a few minutes in the next couple slides to walk through the different sections in this PS&E checklist. The top part of the checklist, as you can see on the screen right now, is for general project information, and it is used to inform contract standards of the point of contact for the project, and it can help them answer any questions or comments or issues that they're seeing while they're checking that PS&E package. The point of contact should be the NCDOT project manager, and if it's not an internal project, the firm project manager should be listed as well. This checklist must be completely filled out at PS&E turn-in. If the checkbox, any checkbox or a line is blank, contract standard sees that as a missing or incomplete, and they'll contact the DOT project manager. So that the submittal package will not be checked in, as I stated before, if this checklist is not 100% complete. All right, so the next section in the PS&E checklist is key documents. This section lists the deliverables that should be denoted as a key document uploaded in the project's pre-construction site. These are agreements, certifications, regulatory approvals, permits, signed environmental document, the environmental consultation, and any design exceptions and the traffic forecast. There is a column that indicates if it's complete or if it's not applicable for that project. And then on the far right, there's a column that is for status or comments. That column is for the project manager to track where that deliverable is at and include any notes or comments that might be helpful to contract standards. Here is an example of one that is filled out, what it would look like when it's filled out. And some best practices, making sure that you're indicating if the deliverable is complete or not applicable, and tracking the status in the comments box. And then a pitfall to avoid is basically having a blank line, not listing whether the deliverable is complete or not applicable. Page 2 of the checklist focuses on the final plan set, special provisions, and quantities. On the far left, there is a box to indicate if a specific plan set is not applicable to a project. The third and fourth column, the third column is got a green circle around it. It says accepted DOT subject matter expert, and then the column next to it is date the plan was accepted. Those are two critical items to make sure they're filled in. So please pay close attention to the accepted DOT subject matter expert column that's circled in green. That must be an NCDOT employee that's responsible for ensuring the completeness and acceptance of the work. It should not be a GESC. A GESC can review the plans, but someone at NCDOT must take responsibility for ensuring that they agree with the review. So if contract standards notices an issue or has concerns with one of the plan sets, they will be contacting NCDOT experts to look at the issue. Here's an example of one that is filled out. So this one has a lot of, you see check marks in each of the plans that are applicable, and you see a subject matter expert from NCDOT listed as well as the date that it was accepted. Those are best practices. And then in the quantities section, which is on the far right, either the pick tool or the AWP or AstroWare should be checked, not both. It should be one or the other. So make sure that there's a note on the bottom of that table that states that, but just be aware that it should be one or the other. Pitfalls to avoid: plans checkbox is marked, but there's no acceptor or date listed, and then having incomplete checkboxes for applicable plan sets that you have in your project. All right. Next section is the correspondence DocuSet document, or it's a section basically for any correspondences that you have. These deliverables should be uploaded to the Let Prep folder, Final Plans library, and in a correspondence DocuSet on the project's pre-construction site. These are things like your approved design criteria, your field inspections, final pavement design recommendations, and geotech recommendations. Here's an example of that. Just make sure you have either your completed box or your not applicable box filled out. That's kind of the key thing there. And that you have it in the right library in DocuSet. All right, the next section is roadway supporting documents. These deliverables should be uploaded to the Let Prep Final Plans library and the roadway supporting documents DocuSet. So these are items like your calculation of quantities, earthwork, final estimate, and then on the bottom you'll see this PS&E checklist. So this PS&E checklist is a requirement to have in there. A few best practices and common pitfalls that were similar to the previous slide are listed on there. Those entail making sure you have the right files in the right libraries, and then making sure you denote it's complete or not applicable. All right, so now we're nearing the end of the PS&E checklist. I hope y'all are excited about that. So got a section on intermediate contract times associated with your transportation management plans, your signal plans, and ITS plans. Ken is going to talk a little bit more about intermediate contract times later. Also, there is a section underneath that for additional information that might be entered into other tools, such as your project commitments. And if there's any force accounts, signing items on your project, they'd like to know that as well. So just indicating whether that's on your project or not. Here's an example of one that is filled out for that. And finally, the last section in the PS&E checklist is an area to indicate any incomplete items and when they will be completed. Additionally, if you have any incomplete items, they need to know what actions need to take place and the responsible person that will be taking those actions. But I do want to note, even though there is a section for this, we are not encouraging anyone to submit an incomplete package. We are expecting that everyone submits a complete PS&E package at turn-in. Other thing I want to mention is that if you have any exceptions for advertisement, that needs to be approved by the chief's office. These should be rare. And if you have federal funds and exceptions, then FHWA approval is needed for those exceptions as well. All right, now we're moving on to project management role, at least during PS&E. So project managers are responsible for leading their teams through PS&E. They are the primary contact, and they are responsible for guiding their teams through the obstacles and challenges associated with delivering a complete package on time. So some things that have related to that is driving your coordination. They should be coordinating with all their team members, ensuring that all the appropriate reviews are occurring on time, and that there's timely responses to comments and questions, both before PS&E and after PS&E if there's any comments following up in a timely manner. Also, having timely communication. So key dates, action items, decisions and modifications that might be occurring on those plans and projects, those need to be communicated very timely to all the project team members. They don't know, someone doesn't know if something's changed on a project, it can set that project up for failure. And then the schedule, monitoring the project schedule. So having a realistic schedule when you start the project and then continuing to monitor that as you progress through the project. Know your critical path. There are things like right-of-way, utility relocations, and permitting that can often land on your critical path. So make sure you're keeping an eye and being proactive on checking where they're at and maybe even having frequent meetings to discuss their status. Also, make sure you have the right predecessors and successors tied to your deliverables and activities, and have that PS&E date on your schedule, please. So if we're not actively managing projects, it will get away from us, and we might be scrambling at the end. And as we talked about before, there's only a few people in here that like to scramble, right? All right, so project manager role, I've got some best practices that project managers can do to ensure a quality PS&E is submitted. Realistic schedule, I talked a little bit about that in the previous slide, making sure you have that PS&E date on your schedule. It's listed as a milestone, and you've got your predecessors and everything you need to turn that in tied to it. Have a reasonable time for right-of-way acquisition, utility relocations, and permitting. Include NCDOT review times on your schedule, and then if you have large reviews and submittals, you might need a second review. So talk to your team, talk about maybe if you're going to need a second submittal or a second review, and plan for that if you need it. It's always easier to take it off, right, than add it, and then you're like, oh, I'm behind. The other item under that is allow adequate time for 100% reviews. If you feel like you're going to need a good amount of time for your 100% review, don't be shy about asking your team to turn things in like 4 weeks before PS&E so that you can have DOT review it, and then the firm or whoever needs to update it in a timely manner so that you feel good about turning your PS&E in. Other items, establish early if your project is going to have a 4-week ad or an 8-week ad. If you're going to have an 8-week ad, you're going to be turning your PS&E 4 weeks earlier than if you were going to have a 4-week ad. So be aware of that. You don't want to switch that near the end where you're getting close to PS&E. That'll cut 4 weeks off your time frame right there. Use the PS&E checklist as a living document. It's there for you. You can track things on it. It's flexible for you to add notes and to track things. Also, make sure you're doing quality control and quality assurance reviews, or that your subject matter experts are doing those. That's very important in making sure our PS&E packages are good quality. And then having timely resolution of issues and questions before and after PS&E submittals. A few pitfalls to avoid: scheduling to complete the project delivery to your let date rather than your PS&E date, cutting reviews and deliverable completion dates down to the wire. It's never fun, is it? And then skipping the 100% plan review and submittal. We don't want to be doing that. Rushing your quality reviews. How many times do you feel rushed to do a quality review? Often? Yeah? Is that fun? Yes? No? Okay. All right. So we don't want to rush those quality reviews. And then another item, if you have pay items with SP next to them, they should have an associated special provision, so keep an eye out for that. And one thing we don't want to be doing is designing through addendums. Let's try to get our designs done and good before it gets to PS&E. Oh. All right. Key things to take away, at least from that section. Build and update a realistic schedule. Include your PS&E on your schedule. Also allow adequate time for your quality reviews. And be accountable and hold your teammates accountable. Make sure you're communicating what needs to be done, who is going to be doing that, when they're going to have that done, and then follow up with them to make sure that it's getting done. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Miss Tasha White. So if you could give her a little bit of a warm welcome as she comes up here, that'd be great.
All right. Thank you, Katrina. Before I get started, I'm going to acknowledge a couple of things. The first thing is that what you're going to hear is a lot of roadway design content. And it's mainly because when plan checking gets it, not that they don't look at everything, but they do have a large focus on roadway design because that's where a lot of the pay items are. The second thing is I see a lot of familiar faces in here, like smiling, excited, right? Most of you are probably going to say to yourself once I start going through the slides, I know this. I've already got that. I'm good. But the reality is that we did a survey of a lot of final plan checking comments over a series of months. And what we are showing here are the findings. And so while you may know it, it's just not showing up as well as it could when it gets to contract standards. All right. And so with that, maybe not. There we go. All right, polling question. What generates the most comments from contract standards plan checking team on a PS&E package? You'll have to type this in. I didn't give you multiple choices, so if you've got your Slido app, please feel free to submit your responses. Earthwork, estimate quantities. I think I see drainage summary. I've got my old lady glasses on, so I can't see as far away as I'd like to. Yeah, seeing a lot of repetitive special provisions, quantities, balance card, goes back to earthwork, right? Yeah, this is really good. Quantities is just sitting there in the middle, it won't move. All right, perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Here we go. All right, so the first place I'm gonna start is earthwork. And I'm gonna start with geotech. When you're doing your package, make sure that you're reviewing all of the geotech quantities that are submitted in the recommendations. What you see here are the 4 main types of recommendations you'll get from geotech, which is roadway, pavement design investigation, structure, and retaining walls. But for the roadway design package, the first two, roadway and pavement design investigation reports, are really where you need to have your focus. There will be quantities in that report, but for some reason, the pavement design investigation quantities a lot of times are missing. So make sure you're looking to make sure you have both reports and going through those. Very key. The next thing that I'll show here is how are the quantities provided. You'll see two types. You'll see contingency items, very easy, like, hey, 100 cubic yards of undercut, right? Make sure you're going through all the sections in the report and making sure that those total up. It should match what's in the tables that are provided in Geotech Recs. The other quantities you'll see are by station ranges, and those are the more critical pieces. Again, these are things that are often missing from the final plans checking package. So make sure that you're looking for those station ranges, making sure that you have incorporated that information into your plans. And for the roadway designer, it is critical that while Geotech gives us those quantities, that you verify that with the earthwork runs that you have. And if you see discrepancies, go back to Geotech and have that conversation with them so that you can determine what the right path forward is. 9 times out of 10, they'll say rely on your earthwork runs, but you still want to make sure you're coordinating that. Something else that will show up in your Geotech Recs, especially out west, but not exclusively, is rock. Make sure you're reading that report to make sure whether or not there's rock present and that it's present in the areas where you're actually cutting out, right? Because that's indicative of material that we may need to treat differently. And it will also tell you how to treat that, whether it's a one-to-one relationship or whether there's a swell factor that you need to associate with. So make sure you're doing that. And then the last thing is going to be make sure that you are incorporating the Geotech items in the plans correctly. That means profiles, cross-sections, typical sections. I've got a couple of sections here, 13.8 and 13.9 in the roadway design manual that will have discussion on that. Got to point it at the screen. All right, earthwork part 2. Make sure that you're aligning your earthwork with the construction phasing. The roadway design manual tells you, 3,000 foot, make sure you do left and right when you have widening, or at least, coordinate that out to make sure that the dirt can move where it needs to on the project. But our construction folks have indicated that they're having some issues sometimes with construction phasing. And we also, point to that. Make sure you're talking to your work zone traffic control engineer, you have that phase and you understand it. I know early on in the process, it's just like an idea of how we can make this project happen, but when you start getting specifics, go back and look at your earthwork again. I'll give you an example that was given to me recently. There's a project, it was identified as a waste project, so they had no borrow quantity that was available for the contractor. But when you break it out by phases, all of a sudden, they've got a whole phase that needs borrow. And they have to account for that. They need to know how to pay for it, where, if I need to go get it, right, or if we can store it on site. These are things that you need to know. So even though it's a waste project, they still want to borrow quantity. It makes it a whole lot easier for them. They don't have to do a supplemental contract with a contractor. So please make sure that you're doing that. If you went to the construction session earlier, you may have heard some of these same things. Something else that often gets confused is shoulder borrow versus shoulder material. I think the way that we have it in the roadway design manual, it says material for shoulder construction, and it has some explanation. Again, I've got the reference there. But essentially, shoulder material, you'll find that on borrow projects with graded shoulders. You don't need it for curb and gutter sections, and you don't need it if you have a trench section, right? But that is basically material that's needed. You will incorporate that into your earthwork runs. It is not a standalone quantity. Shoulder borrow, by contrast, is on a waste project. Suitable material, and you will do that in your earthwork runs, and you will show it at the very bottom of your summary. Again, section 15.4-.11, great material for you to look at. The last thing that I would say is pavement structure volumes. This is one of the things I was like, do we really still need that? Like a lot of times you ask yourself, why are we doing this? Do you really still need it? So I asked, and the answer was yes. Contract standards doesn't necessarily need it. We don't necessarily need it, but our folks in construction may need it. That's going to be in your cut sections. And basically what it allows them to do is to know the differential so that if they're running into issues with the contractor on site in terms of how much excavation, or if they do a check after the pavement is in place, they have an easy way to account and know what they're looking for. So make sure you're doing those pavement structure volumes. Next thing is drainage. I saw drainage summary. Mr. Bird's here. We go back. For the drainage summary, I know that our hydraulic designers are really responsible for this. The reality is if the hydraulic designer tags it correctly in the CAD file, the automated drainage summary should pick up a lot of these things that I'm talking about. But it's actually great information for anyone to know, right? And so the first thing is going to be identify the correct tier for your project. You're going to find that on a title sheet. If you want to know the difference between the two, got a little reference here to the roadway design manual, but basically statewide tier are going to be interstates or strategic highway corridors, right? But the difference is how you pay for them. So on your statewide tier, you're going to have side drain pipe as your pay item. If you go to regional or sub-regional tier, you're going to have drainage pipe for your pay item. Very simple, but again, it's a lot of times you might have one thing on a title sheet, but your drainage summary doesn't match up. So make sure that the right tier is selected from the beginning, so when that hydraulic engineer starts their work, they're working in the right space. Type A, B, and D boxes. So your typical drainage structure is a type B box. But every now and again, these type A and type D boxes show up. Well, what are they? Type A boxes have a limitation on the size of pipe that can come into the narrow side of the box. Again, you'll see that usually designated on the plans. It's not a hard thing, but just for your information, if you're looking, and then shallow boxes are your type D boxes. Make sure you're picking the right size box. Making sure that you're paying for extra depth boxes correctly. Again, it's all in the summary. It tells you the ranges of depths that you need, so just making sure that you're accounting for that correctly. Identification of traffic bearing boxes. This always used to be a question, like, when do I do traffic bearing? When do I not do traffic bearing? If the box is going to be within 4 feet of the edge of travelway and it is not going to be contained in some sort of monolithic island, then you're going to need to have traffic bearing boxes. I actually skipped verify grate selection, so I'm going to go back to that. Grate selection, catch basins, you have E, F, and G grates. Look at your standard drawings. That's the best recommendation I can give for you. Intuitively, you think that you're going up station, but the box's determination is actually based on the direction of travel. So again, rely on your standard drawings. If you're confused about which one goes where, great resource for you. Similarly, narrow slot grates versus wide grates. We use narrow slot grates in most of our facilities that are not contained within, and I'm going to say full control of access, because the expectation is that you may have a pedestrian or bicyclist somewhere in the vicinity, and you don't want them to get stuck. We did have a project that got pretty close to the end, and looking at plans, and I'm like, why do we have wide slot grates on this? And it's because they saw partial control of access, and they made an assumption, right? And so when I went back and said, hey, we really need narrow slot grates, it forced the hydraulic engineer to do a whole new series of calculations to make sure that what they had still works. So again, early identification of these things are key. Welded steel installation, in soil, out of soil, provider percentage. A lot of times people will do 50-50. You can consult with your geotech engineer to kind of see if there's something that might skew you in one way or the other. But primarily, it's about having a pay item. Again, making sure that there's something available for our folks to work with the contractor on to make sure that they don't have to go back and do a supplement. That's going to likely be very costly. Making sure you're verifying the pipe thicknesses. Berm ditch outlets, they show up. A lot of times people will try to pay for those BDOs. It is not an actual pay item. The pay item associated with it are paved ditches. Make sure you go and account for those paved ditches. And the last thing are retention basins. I know years ago we used to have retention basins and we would pay for them lump sum. It was great, right? Didn't have to have a fight with someone and try to figure out like what the individual pay items are. That is no longer the case. So just make sure that those retention basins, you have individual pay items for everything that's contained in it. Guardrail, guide rail, and barrier. Some of the common issues are just identification of the warrant points. Make sure that you're identifying those appropriately, both on the trailing and the approach end. Very similar to those EF and G grates, the approach and trailing end are determined on how the direction of travel is going, right? Make sure you have the correct flare rates for your guardrail and your end units. Show the correct end units on the plans that are appropriate for your situation. Also, make sure you're providing the deductions for those anchor units. A lot of time we'll have the full run, the deductions have not been taken out, so now you're overrunning your quantity. And use the correct links that are associated with those. And then also something very simple is verify the placement in the plans and the cross sections that align with the standard drawings. Look at your standard drawings to make sure that how you're laying it out in your plan view is correct, and that's going to show up in your cross section. Now, one of the things I haven't pointed to are these little boxes at the top, and I hope that y'all have been paying attention to some of those, but they all kind of say the same thing. Make sure that you're consistent with your numbers. What you're showing in your summaries or your calc sheets should also be the same numbers that are showing up in your estimate. What's in your summary should also be showing up in your plans. It sounds like it's very simple. I know that sometimes it feels time consuming. I think I'll point back to what Katrina said and what you all acknowledge is that a good PS&E package starts at the beginning. And so if you're doing the checklist and using the tools that we have all the way through the process, these things should not be a problem. I do know that we have revisions. Sometimes, you'll have a property owner and now all of a sudden we're shifting things around. Just make sure you're going back and saying, hey, am I still hitting all the beats, right, that I'm supposed to hit? Temporary design. Several things associated with this. I kind of lumped this all together. It goes back through some of the things I've already talked about. But one of the things is showing a typical section when you have a temporary alignment. If you have any temporary alignment on your plans, you need to have a typical section. It needs to contain a pavement design. I would highly encourage you, once you know you have a temporary alignment, to identify how long that's going to be in place so that you can request that pavement design. It's easier to do it earlier than trying to scramble, right, and doing it at the end. Make sure you're paying for placement and removal per the specifications of that pavement. Temporary guardrail, a lot of times it's not showing up in the summary. It's in the plans, it's needed. So again, just making sure that you're identifying it correctly and that particular pay item does not require removal. Show and pay for temporary drainage, that's pipe placement and removal. Coordination, again, with works on traffic control for temporary steel plates that might be needed. I missed it earlier, but I'll show this one here on the slide. There's a session at 1 o'clock. Matt Loffer is doing that in conjunction with work zone traffic control, talking about moving traffic and water through the work zone. There have been issues that have cropped up because that water in those temporary situations have really not been handled very well. There's also a session at 1 o'clock for geotech where Matt Alexander will give you more information about expectations for geotech. So highly encourage you guys to attend those if you don't have other plans. Just some general notes. I've covered some of these, but use the correct calculation of quantity sheets. Contract Standards has those on their website. I know that it's really easy to take a copy from an old project and apply it. And by and large, they don't change very much, but you never know. It's good to check in and make sure you have the right sheets. Verify that all pay item totals are based on the most recent recommendations. Again, I talked about design revisions. If you're moving alignments appreciably, you may need some new geotech recs. There may be some new quantities that show up. So make sure that you're going back on SharePoint and you're finding the correct, most recent recommendations. Verifying that the correct pay items are being used. Kind of self-explanatory, but again, contract standards has a pay item list. If you're not clear or don't understand like exactly what you should be paying for or what the item is, please consult that. Verify the totals in the summaries and the calculation of quantity sheet actually match what's shown in the estimate. I mentioned that earlier. That is key. I mean, you can be consistently wrong, which is not necessarily great, but if you're consistent, it removes a little bit of seed of doubt. And I think if anyone in here who's checked plans before, right, you find that first error and you're like, okay, and then you find it again and you're like, okay, now I really start having to dig in, right? So we want you to be right. We want you to have the right things, but being consistent will severely reduce the number of comments that you can have. The next thing I have is verify the methodology for computations as well as the numbers. If you are the checker, there's computed by check by. I have a friend that says that all the time. We're computed by check by. That's who we are, right? If you're the checker, don't just verify the number. Verify that how someone is getting to that number actually is correct and makes sense. Providing cross-references to details and other disciplines' plans makes it easy for the plan checker to kind of go and look and say, okay, I see it here. Yes, it lines up, it makes sense. Same thing, making sure you're reviewing their quantities and their design intent to make sure you are consistent. I know that we have a checklist with structures to make sure we're consistent on the expectations, who's got what. We don't necessarily have that for all the disciplines, but it's a good practice to get in the habit of. Last thing I have here is become familiar with the standard specifications. I know it's really easy to go to roadway design manual or go to drainages manual or go to the standard drawings, but the specifications actually tell you exactly how everything is supposed to be paid for. So if you have any doubt, those specs can really be your friend. All right, the next thing, I have 3 more slides, tools and guidance. So we finally undertook taking the 2015 consultant guidelines and updated them to align with the PDN. And so May of 24, we actually pushed that information in the roadway design manual. It is very general. It is intended for consultants and internal staff alike. Again, they align with each stage of the PDN, so your PDN deliverables. So make sure that you're looking at that. That is going to be in Chapter 13. We kind of added it to the end there. Something else that people have been really looking forward to is an update of the 2018 final plans checklist. I'm going to give a shout out to Sherry Calhoun. She worked a long and hard time the last few months with contract standards, updating their final plans checklist. And so I actually didn't check it this morning. Did you check it this morning? Is it live? As of last night, it was not live. We're waiting on IT. We're going to blame IT for this. But you'll see that it's for CS1. This is contract standard sheet. There was a lot of time and care kind of going through what they felt they needed in terms of checking plans. It feels repetitive if you step back through our previous phases, but it's what makes them comfortable that they have a very good package. So hopefully in the next day or two, you will see that live. It's going to be in the same location where the 2018 is currently. And the last thing, like I mentioned at the beginning, we kind of did an audit of several months worth of final plans comments. And a lot of what I've talked about today, you see here in this list. What we're doing is working with a company to produce some short videos that people can tap into anytime, right? To go, okay, what was that again? Hey, I can go watch that video, or I can go to that section in the video and see exactly what we're talking about. The 1A sheet creation is one that it's almost in the can. It should be out this month. We're waiting for a final edit from the company. I know, Sherry, they've moved into working with Matt Alexander, talking about geotech, so that'll be the next one coming online. The reality, I think Art said something yesterday. He was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to come to that session. And I said, well, the reality is a lot of this stuff is in the roadway design manual, but we recognize that not everyone's brain processes information the same way, and that sometimes watching a little video will actually help you get along a little bit better. And so we're looking forward to producing these. And this is really the last slide. So I was in church a couple of weeks ago, and I was intently listening to the pastor, and he made this statement: it should never be about the tools, it's about the message. And I was like, man, that's great. That goes great with my presentation. Because we have a lot of tools, right? I think we can all admit some people might feel like we have more tools than what we need, right? We've got checklists, we've got guidance, we've got specs, we got all these things, new tools, PS&E checklists, right? We have a lot of tools, and they're great. But we don't need to lose the message. And the message in this case is the PS&E package. It communicates the message of the design intent for construction, right? And so I stole it. I was not going to give him credit at first, and I was like, no, I can't do that. So I kind of changed it a little bit, and I said it should never be about the tools. It's about a quality advertisement proposal for construction, and the tools just help us achieve the goal. So if you take nothing else away from this, remember the goal. The goal is a quality PS&E package. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, how many of you have turned in a package? It's gone past plan checking. You haven't heard from us in a couple weeks, and this guy emails you out the blue saying you're missing something. Yeah, I know. I'm usually that guy. So, one of the commonly overlooked aspects of plan preparation is the calculation of contract time. And contract time is provided into the proposal, so it's calculated after the project has completely gone through plan checking. Now, if you look at the schedule, your turn-in to your advertisement to the let, I actually only have about 2 weeks to look at every single project in the letting. So I may or may not be going and grabbing things from plan checking early to try to get a jump on some of these bigger jobs, especially these 8-week ads. The truth is that any aspect of a project may have an impact on construction and on contract time. Luckily for me today, I'm going to rehash a lot of things you've already heard. So I'm just going to be proposing a lot of questions to hopefully just get you guys to think, hey, while I'm designing this, while I'm planning this, did I keep something in mind? I think it was Division 9 yesterday said, keeping the end in mind, and that's something that we should all think of the end product of how will this be constructed in the field. There we go. That's the right way. So 3 of the common missing items, let's see. Utility relocations, which are provided in the UBO special provision. Another one is moratoria considerations. They're usually provided by your permits. And the last is just the quantity breakdowns and what's needed to calculate for ICTs. That's intermediate contract times. That's for the phasing. Okay, the utility by other special provision is part of the proposal. And I asked Bo to sit right up front because him and I have had so many conversations about this one. As a part of the proposal, the UBO is written for the appropriate audience, and that is a contractor who's placing a bid on the job. And a contractor really cares about only 3 things typically. Are the utilities out of my way? Number 2, oh, they're not? When will they be out of my way? And 3, please provide some contact information in case the utility is accidentally disturbed. So if your special provision is 3 pages long and only describes 2 utilities, you probably have a lot of excessive language in the special provision and something will become missed. A contractor will not need a synopsis of the 4 months it took Duke Energy to place poles. They just need to know, is Duke finished? And if Duke is finished, are the piggybacking utilities finished as well? An exception to this is notification statements. If the utility requires an action by the contractor, so say the utility needs the grading done before they can set their poles, then you may need to add a statement letting the contractor know that once grading is completed along the side of the project, that they need to notify the utility. And then in turn, we also need to let the contractor know how long the utility will be there once they get on site. Now, every UBO special provision has a date in the bottom left corner. So if the SP is 3 months old, have you taken the time to reach out to your utility coordinators and make sure that the relocations are on schedule or that they actually completed as planned? And if not, I ask you, how do you know that the SP on SharePoint is an accurate representation of site conditions? So let's switch over to moratorium. And these are provided by the permits. And to draw more attention to them, a provision is placed in the general section of the proposal which clearly states each individual construction moratorium. So simply, are your permits in hand? If not, have you got an exception? And if you're having to seek an exception, have you really gone and talked to ECAP or your division environmental staff just to verify what moratoria are impacting your project? So if you look at the screen, you've got a sister bridge that was constructed adjacent to a bridge. The bridge was about half a mile long, and step one was to cut down trees for a construction entrance. Now, typically, a date availability is 6 weeks after a project is let. So if you have a bat moratorium that prevents tree clearing from April 1st to October 15th, is the February letting a good time for this project? Most of you have found out, no, it's not. And so depending on the amount of clearing, maybe an August to December letting would be more appropriate for this kind of project. It might be difficult on the slide, but if you look in the back, you've got a little bit of a wetland area there. So what if you have a primary nursery moratorium? So you can do no in-water construction from February 15th to September 30th. Is the project in the correct letting to allow a contractor to build to get out of water before the moratorium? Well, if not, have you at least given them enough time to acquire the cans or cofferdams and set them so that they can work outside of water? And here is 95% of my day. Quantity breakouts for ICTs or phasing. As a department, we have a responsibility to the traveling public to construct projects in a reasonable amount of time. Quantity breakouts are necessary to calculate intermediate contract times, especially when 2 or more items do not work well together. And here's an example of what I mean. How often have you heard the phrase, well, this project's critical, the contractor has to begin immediately, but we don't have all the right-of-way? Okay, so have you taken the time to look at the phasing, compared the phasing of the project in the TMP to the right-of-way? So if you need right-of-way in phase 2, and it's going to take 6 months to get, do you have enough work in phase 1 for the contractor? You got a year of work in phase 1 and only 6 months to get the right-of-way in phase 2, you're fine. But if it becomes reversed, you have a claim. And to compound that, what if phase 1 is a cut section and phase 2 is the borrow? Well, where are you going to stockpile all that excess? Was that considered? So a different example. Say you have a phased bridge and an in-water work moratorium. How long will phase one, including the traffic shift, take so that you can ensure that a contractor doesn't become idle in phase two? Another example would be one that has actually gotten a lot better over the last, I'd say, 6 months. Say you have to install a 16-inch ductile iron water line down the left side of the job, but there's work available along the right side. Well, we had, I think, at one point a 50-week lead time on ductile iron, so we had to account for 1 year of work. That made for a lot of interesting challenges. So, say the material acquisition was to increase again. Is that something that you guys think about? Did I check with Materials and Tests and Todd Whittington's group to say, hey, are we seeing any kind of problems with these materials we're selecting? So what information do you need? I like the slide that y'all used earlier, just that everything formulated, populated. I have an extensive laundry list, and unfortunately, it varies from project to project. In simplest terms, construction takes time, so anything that impacts construction will also impact the contract time. So, I'm going to turn things over now to Jeff to speak about specifications and addendums.
See, my instructions to keep Jamie Bird out of this presentation weren't heeded, so I might get heckled. Good morning, everybody. Yes, going to talk about specifications and addendums. There was the picture didn't show up, Terry. Last year's conference, Nicole Hackler and myself gave a presentation entitled Ingredients for a Quality 100% PS&E Package. It's on YouTube. I would encourage you to find it and review it. It's still very relevant, and it's a good companion to today's presentation. Well, there it is. There's the picture. If you know why there's a picture of her and I baking a cake, then you were at last year's presentation. If you don't know why there's a picture of Nicole and I breaking the cake, then you need to go find the video and look. Effects of late and incomplete PS&E packages. Katrina touched on a couple of these earlier. I'm going to expand on them. I think it's important to understand the detrimental effects of late and incomplete PS&E packages. I'll read through some of these. Late, incomplete PS&E packages, they lead to missed or incorrect pay items, provisions, plan sheets, lead to insufficient time to assemble the proposal documents, curtails ability to correct problems found during proposal development, leads to having incomplete or no information for scheduled committee meetings. And these committee meetings have to be held at a certain time. They're scheduled for a certain time prior to advertisement. Goal setting, contract time committees. If we don't have the information for those committee meetings to come up with a contract time or come up with a goal, then obviously it compresses the time even further we have to get the proposal ready for advertisement. Trying to play catch up during proposal development increases the possibility of errors in the advertisement. These errors give rise to addenda. And last one I want to stress very much, addenda should be the exception, not the rule. Going back a little bit to having time to develop the proposal, it occurred to me speaking to some people prior to this meeting, and I want to mention it. Not all PS&E packages are going to be perfect. But one of the best things you can do is to be responsive when we reach out to you, because our time is finite to get a proposal ready. Some of the best experiences we've had developing a proposal wasn't necessarily the PS&E package that was given to us was perfect, but when we reached out to the firms or divisions and said, hey, we need this, this is missing, those firms jumped right on it, got us the stuff we needed in a hurry. They seemed eager to get it to us and responsive, and that worked out great. Even though the package initially may not have been 100%, when they jumped on it and were responsive, that made it a much better experience. And that's one of the best things you can do to make it a quality PS&E package. What you don't want is example on the right side of the screen where you've got more addendum than you do proposals. These statistics show what kind of errors and oversights that incomplete PS&E packages give rise to. These are the most common prevalent addenda types we encounter. You can see some of the things, provision revised, note added, the quantities revised, adding new quantities, revising details, revising the provision. I will note one of the things, the note added 180 times. And again, if you look on the slide, this is 200 projects during this 2-year period from August 22 to July 24. It was constituted 200 projects. So 184 times provision were revised in those 200 projects. Notes added 180 times. The note added, I will point out, 180 times. Not always, but when you see note added, a lot of times that was a Band-Aid that we had to put on a project that something wasn't right, didn't have time to fix it. We slap a note to contractor in the proposal or maybe a note on the plans to sort of override something that may have been done. So that's a big red flag right there. One error that I noted on my notes here when Tasha was talking, she was mentioning the shoulder material and the shoulder bar. I made a scribbled little note here, something we've seen quite a few times in the last couple of years. When you're developing your project, you cannot have borrow and shoulder borrow pay items in the same proposal. Something I thought I would mention since you brought that up. We've seen that several times. We've had a few arguments with firms, which you cannot have borrow and shoulder borrow pay items in the same project. Just thought I'd mention that since it was mentioned in the Tasha's presentation. This slide was in my presentation last year, and Katrina made a reference to this earlier. A planned addendum or advertisement through addendum is when we have elements of the project that we know will not be ready in time by the advertisement date. So we advertise a project we know is incomplete or with errors, and we have to correct it by addendum. Unfortunately, the slide in last year's presentation did not have the desired effect. This has become a almost routine practice now. This is most often the result of projects coming in very late, many times lacking all the necessary components. I'll point out it's a very tedious and exhaustive process when this happens, when we are given a package is turned in, and a week later we get a call saying, when would I have to have you all this stuff, plans and everything for the addendum? We haven't advertised the project yet. At that point, we have to do an advertisement package and an addendum PS&E package. And keep those separate because we're going to have plans coming in that we don't have ready and we won't have prior to advertisement. And we have to keep all the associated pay items, provisions, or anything that might go with those plans or provisions and keep them separate so what we advertise is consistent. And then we do an addendum to fix the problem, basically. That's not a good way to handle business. And unfortunately, we've seen more of that. That's on the rise. Another point I want to touch on is the uniformity of PS&E package, uniformity of proposals we produce. They need to be consistent and uniform, regardless of who develops them, whether it's division, contract standards development unit. The contract industry has expressed a desire to see proposals that are more consistent throughout the state in regards to pay items, pay units, construction methods, etc., as well as which special provisions are included in the proposal. You should use established, vetted special provisions whenever possible. Reach out to the proposal and specification section of Contract Standards Development Unit for a special provision if you're unsure, if you need help. Good resources are the specifications engineer in our group, Lisa Penny. Also, there's a division contracts liaison engineer, which many of you probably know, Alan Fowler. He can help with any consistency issues or just being a liaison between the contracts office and divisions. So feel free to reach out to them if you have any questions. It's no need to reinvent the wheel. Maybe we see a lot of proposals. There may be some things that we can help you with as far as provisions. We have a huge provision library that we may have seen this situation and we can help you out with. Lisa would be a good resource for that. Proposal developers should be using APA, which is the automated proposal application. What is APA? Well, it's an application that helps you develop proposals. Lisa Penny is the lead from our group for APA. You can contact her directly or reach out to me with any question you might have concerning this application. I believe her and Carl Schoonmaker from our group had a booth yesterday discussing APA, and I think we got some good response. But if any more questions or any issues you might have or want to get on that, reach out to us and contact us. APA, why use APA? It's got the latest provisions designated by let date implemented for ease of selecting the appropriate provision for your project. The reason for use can be found. It helps you decide whether to select a provision or not in lineup sheets and within application for ease of properly selecting the provision of need. It generates the proposal lined up correctly in a consistent format. Right now, the current users are NCDOT proposal engineers, embedded consultants for division and central contracts. Local government agencies and design firms are supporting in proposal development that are supporting proposal development pending use. The APA homepage website, some of the things it includes instructions for APA permission rights for internal DOT and external partners, proposal developers, the application itself, provisions links, hub for both the 2018 and 2024. Hopefully we're about through with 2018 projects, hopefully. Pre-construction special provisions, 2018 and 2024 special provision sites have links to all the unit PSPs. Pre-construction site has project-specific provisions developed using the templates and writer guides, which helps with that consistency in making projects look the same regardless of where they come from for our industry partners in construction. Instructions, provision, writer's guide, templates, but a lot of good information is out there. APA lineup sheets allow a light repository of provisions for those designers not developing proposal but supporting the proposal process. So it's a good tool. A lot of hard work's going into this. And there are the contacts. With that, that's all I had. They're the numbers you can reach the people on this panel. And that's all I had.
Great job. I think there's a few questions that folks have submitted through the Slido app, so we'll pop those up. We'll try to address a few of them in the next few minutes, and then we'll get you out of here for lunch. Katrina, I don't know if you can see them up here, or we can read them out. Or he can read them out loud, too.
Sounds good.
I'll read the question for you. So first question, has NCDOT considered revisiting the flowchart generator schedule to account for larger projects with greater complexity and more pay items?
I can tell you that NCDOT has considered looking at the project flow chart generator. At this time, it's still being considered, being modified and stuff like that. So continue to use that until you hear otherwise.
Next question. In the PS&E checklist, is it NCDOT or the consultant's responsibility to fill out the responsible for and date approved section in the section where the 100, 150, et cetera plan sets are shown?
Great question. So you can have either. We've had the firm fill out that section, but the NCDOT project manager should review that for accuracy. So either one can fill it out.
Great. Next question. Should final plans and specs be uploaded to the proper location in Let Prep before or after NCDOT SME review and approval?
Okay. So I would recommend uploading it to the Let Prep folder after the review and acceptance.
All right.
We don't want to have to replace them, so do that review first.
When should final electronic files be uploaded and to what folder?
All right, so the PS&E checklist will tell you exactly what folder to upload it to. It's in the Let Prep folder, but then there's different folders in there that can be created, and that PS&E checklist will tell you exactly which ones and what docusets to create. So you can use that as a source for that part of the question. When should your final electronic files be uploaded? I would say no later than your PS&E submittal date. So whenever you feel like those deliverables are final and ready to be uploaded, that's when you should upload them. Anything to add for that one? No? Okay.
Very good. This question, I think, is for Terry Canales in the back of the room. Are these sessions being recorded for reference and to show others who do production work in our company?
Yes, they are being recorded.
Okay.
I know. I'll pretend to be Terry right now.
All right. Since this NCDOT cost is to my WBS, how much funding should I allow for, or is there any way to estimate this?
Try to understand the question. We'll have to get back to you on that question.
You may need clarification.
Yeah, we might need some clarification on what costs we're being referred to on that one.
Okay. How should temporary shoring for traffic control be shown on the roadway design plans? Should all phases be shown as well?
I would say that the only thing that's really required for shoring for work zone traffic control is that you show them in your temporary condition. And so a lot of times when you have a temporary alignment, you're actually doing that on a separate sheet. And so you really just have to show the beginning and end of the shoring in that sheet. And I would say the answer to your question is probably yes, in terms of if you have different phases that you need shoring that's moving from phase to phase, it's really just a reference. They're going to go to the TMPs and actually see the actual phasing, and you'll have the shoring notes to kind of indicate what that looks like. I forgot to mention making sure that you actually pull out your details that are provided by Geotech.
Okay, very good. Next question. Which quantities need to be broken out by phase for accurate ICT generation? Is this guidance in the new PDN or PS&E checklist?
This guidance is not in the PDN or PS&E checklist. We do have a guidelines for calculated contract time. 90% of your quantities will be roadway-related quantities, but we've just had a recent project where they had estimated amount of time for doing a time where they were going to close a Y line. And when I looked at it, they had not considered utility construction, which is not a part of those guidelines. They also had added a retaining wall, which was not part of the guidelines. So it goes back to anything that is going to take time to construct needs to be considered. It's really up to the TMP's designer on how they're going to phase it, but they just need to keep construction in mind. So I really wish I could just say, here's a list of roadway pay items, and I can give you that, but you do need to look at other items too.
And so I think we're at time. Terry?
We are, yeah.
Yep.
We'll get answers to the rest of these questions and get them posted for you.
Yeah. Before everyone leaves, so they are actually asking that we do blessing for the food in the room. I'm going to take care of that. But I also received a message that we're all going to have to make new friends. There are seats at the tables for everyone that's here. You just may not be able to sit with the people that you want to. So make new friends, right? All right, so please pray with me. Father God, we thank you for this opportunity to be here today. Lord, we pray for our brothers and sisters who are out west who are really struggling right now. Also those who are down east affected by the tornado. Lord, we know that you will make provision. There are many sites that are being set up to collect donations, many hands. I was very encouraged this morning to see just how many people are finding alternate methodologies to get things to folks who are just really struggling and stranded. Lord, we thank you for providing this nourishment for our minds, and we thank you for providing the nourishment today for our bodies. May it be blessed and bless our bodies. In your Son, Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
And on the screen is the QR code for your PDHs for this session.
Thank you.
Doing all right? Great job, y'all. Good job, Katrina.